The Gatsby Wellcome Neuroscience Project, in conjunction with the college, started quite a while back, 2016, while I was still Dean of the college. It was actually Professor Sir Simon Wesley, who was the president before me, who really set it going. And it was about modernising the neuroscience that we teach to trainees. So we had a look at what we were actually teaching them, and it was pretty old-fashioned. It hadn't been updated for quite a long time, and the exam questions were pretty old-fashioned. And neuroscience is really moving very fast at the moment, and the things that are being discovered are eventually going to affect the way that we treat our patients. So the people we train at the moment, who will be practicing far into the future, they will see some really interesting things coming through neuroscience and new treatments. And we felt that the trainees needed to understand the basic science behind this, so that when the new treatments came along, they would be ready to do it. It's based partly on an American initiative. There's a group there that have put together a national neuroscience curriculum. They have a harder job than us because in the UK, the curriculum is the college helps to write it, and then the GMC approves it, and there's a national curriculum and then a national exam, whereas in the States it's not like that. So they've had a harder job, but they've put together a national neuroscience curriculum, and that's backed by a lot of teaching material, really innovative teaching material. So we worked with them and we drew on quite a lot of their experience and ideas. And we looked at our curriculum, we updated it, we modernised it, and we did quite a lot, and are still doing quite a lot of sort of taking neuroscience out there and raising awareness of it, updating people. And there's been a fantastic response. Everybody's enjoyed it, from medical students to senior psychiatrists, right across the age range. People have seen how interesting it is. So it's been a fantastic experience.
Thank you so much for explaining that. So moving on to some women in science that continue to inspire you.
The first person ever to inspire me, and I read a book about her when I was about 10, was Marie Curie, who was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. Did a lot of research on radiation, and in the First World War set up mobile X-ray units and went round and they went round the battlefields X-raying soldiers that had been injured in combat. So she was a real. I remember for the first time I read about her, because I grew up in the 60s, where women in science wasn't such a big thing as it is now. There weren't as many of them. So I remember being really inspired by her, and then there being so many other women. There are so many great women. One of the ones that inspires me at the moment is Trish Greenhouse, who's a professor of primary care at Oxford, and she's been really active all through the pandemic, putting together advice, looking at remote consultations. She picked up on the necessity to wear masks long before most people realised what a good idea that was. And she's fantastic, and she shares all her work on Twitter. I spend quite a lot of time on Twitter, so I follow her on Twitter, and I've been really impressed by her. She also goes cold water swimming every day, but I'm not going to follow her in that. So that's just two of many, many women who've been really impressive.
And how do you think we can work towards gender inclusion in the sciences?
That's improving, but you still see more boys than girls going into the sciences. I went to an all-girls school, so there wasn't really the gender pressure. You know, lots of girls were doing science. You hear about girls who are put off doing science because in a mixed school often there'll be sort of more boys in the classrooms. That didn't affect me. I think, as well as the gender imbalance, there's a whole problem about where science is taught. So I've tried to do some work around improving access to medicine. A lot of the people who come to medical school have been to private schools. It's still much easier to get into medical school if you've been to a private school. And when I was working with one of our local secondary schools to try and encourage, one of the state schools to try and encourage pupils there to do medicine, the science teaching was terrible, and in some places non-existent. So the chemistry teacher left, and they just weren't able to replace him. They couldn't get a chemistry teacher, which meant a whole cohort of pupils couldn't do chemistry. You can't get into medical school without chemistry, or you can, but it's much more difficult. So there's even a bigger problem is how we get the science teaching out to everybody.
Yeah, that's quite awful that they weren't even actually able to replace the teacher.
Yeah.
So it's like a whole year of people basically finding it much harder to advance themselves.
Yes, yeah. And I don't think that school's alone in that. There's a big shortage of science teachers.
Right, okay. And which unhelpful stereotypes work against girls who want to engage with science?
Yeah, the stereotype of a scientist is still a elderly, white, balding man, but that's changing, and there are lots of female scientists now. We need to make sure that people see them. We need to increase the visibility. I've watched quite carefully on the news during the pandemic. And there have been more women appearing. I mean, I think if you counted, there would still be more male scientists, but there have been women appearing. When we were on the Neuroscience Project, we were really careful with our conferences to make sure that we always had women speakers. It's about people see. It's about role models. People need to see. They need to see scientists that are young women, and young women with families as well. We had a neuroscience conference where one of the speakers had to be put on in the middle of the day because she had to do the school run in the morning and the afternoon. And I was really careful to say that when I was introducing her, because she was a great role model, and for the girls and the women in the audience, they could see what they could do.
I really love that. So it's about being honest about the fact that you can be a woman in science and at times you will have to juggle things.
Yeah. And it doesn't, because there's also an idea that not just science, there's lots of successful things. An idea that it's hard to be successful and have children. So it's really important to show that that's not true, and because it's not true for men. Nobody says successful men can't have children. Shouldn't
No,
be true for women either.